Hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Gecikme için kusura bakmayın. Andréas Lang'ın Kırık Hatıralar sergisi kapsamında düzenlediğimiz panelde serginin sanatçısı Andreas'la, küratörleri Geniş Açı Proje Ofisi ile, serginin kitabı için bir yazı kaleme alan Aylin Vartanyan'la ve Hrant Dink Vakfı'ndan Nayat Karaköse ile birlikteyiz. Hepsine çok teşekkür ediyorum katkıları için. Ben çok kısaca sözü vermeden çok kısa biyografik bilgi vereceğim. Daha sonra kısa sunumlar şeklinde ilerleyeceğiz. Sonra da soru cevap şeklinde. Andréas Lang çalışmalarına Paris'te serbest fotoğrafçı olarak başlıyor. 1995'ten itibaren de hem fotoğrafçılık hem de video ve belgesel film alanında çalışıyor. Resimleriyle bir yerin gizli kalmış tarihsel, mitolojik veya kişisel öykülerinin izini sürüyor. Pek çok farklı serisi var ve pek çok farklı burs kazanmış. Hem solo hem grup sergilerinde yer almış bir sanatçı. Tarabya Kültür Akademisi'nin misafir sanatçı programı kapsamında aldığı burstan bu yana da Türkiye'de hafıza ve tarih üzerine çalışıyor. Eylül-Aralık 2018, Kasım-Aralık 2020 ve şimdi Mayıs'ta 2023'te Tarabya programında. Lang bu sergide Kırık Hatıralar'daki imgeleri aracılığıyla Türkiye manzaraları üzerinden görünmez kılınan bir kolektif hafızaya dair görünür ipuçları bırakıyor. Bu sergide de özellikle geç Osmanlı İmparatorluğu, Ermeni mirası, Ermeni soykırımı ve Cumhuriyet döneminin başlangıcı ile bağlantılı mekanlara bakarak nelerin hatırlandığı ve nelerin unutulmaya yüz tuttuğu üzerine odaklanıyor. Ben sözü Andreas'a vereceğim. Bu çalışmaya nasıl başladı, nasıl ilerledi? I'll switch to English. So I gave a very short biography of you and now giving the floor to you to tell about your work in English. You'll start.
Okay, about my work in general.
Yeah, and this exhibition in particular.
Okay. Okay. So. Yeah, that's better if you ask me questions.
Why did you decide to come to? Why did you apply to Tarabya residency, and how did you come up with this proposal?
Actually, yeah, my work has been, as you probably said in your introduction, it's about the layers of time, about history, and about also what's invisible in places. So actually, I was working on previous topics. Like one previous project was on German colonialism. I was doing research starting from material from my great-grandfather, who was a colonial soldier in Congo and Cameroon. And before that, I had a project which brought me for the first time to Turkey and the Middle East. And it was on the Crusades and early Christianity and this ambivalence of Holy Land, Holy War, and religious conflict, and bringing it to a contemporary place as well, because it's an ongoing thing, unfortunately, especially in the Middle East. So actually, when I worked on that project, it was 2006 and 2007, and there was also a book then later and an exhibition. And while I traveled in Turkey, and I had this idea that I really must go to East Anatolia one day and see these places of what happened in 1915 in the Armenian genocide. I cannot explain why. It was like an interior call. Yeah. And then also in Damascus and in Jerusalem, there's an Armenian diaspora, and I was in touch with them, and I even stayed in the Armenian hospice in Jerusalem. They gave me a room, and because the other one was overbooked. So yeah, there was yes. So there was this link. Yeah, and then when I knew about Tarabya, I knew precisely what project I'm going to apply with. Yeah, so it was there before Tarabya, the project, kind of in me.
And I realize you have been working on memory before too, because your work on this post-colonial Central Africa is based on the photos and the notes of your great-great-grandfather. Great.
One time great.
One great.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So
You already have an interest in working on memory.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's always been around that in my work. It's always been around places, landscapes, and the deeper layers behind the visible layers, like also projection upon the space, like a collective memory, kind of, which is also linked to images we carry along. For example, I lived a long time in France, and my first pictures I did unconsciously, and then I had a first exhibition with those landscapes, and all of a sudden the curator said, "Oh, he has the view of a German romantic," and I was like, "Okay." It first felt a bit awkward. Or strange to me, but then I looked into that, and it made sense, and I consciously explore that road, and knowing that it has a lot to do with history as well, and with the layers of history.
Now, I'm curious about your impressions about the memory work in, I mean, the way we remember in Turkey, because you looked not only at the Armenian cultural heritage sites, but also the new museums and the displays which glorify the Ottoman history and which are very much connected to the recent memory projects of the government. So you have been looking at both. I mean, what we are remembering, but what we are pushed to remember.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I mean, this seeing what when I travel around in Turkey, I realized that memory is being dealt with or not dealt with, and when it's dealt with, it's in a very strange, surreal way, creating narratives that are not really honest sometimes, and neglecting things, leaving things to oblivion. And that attitude also shows in how buildings are treated, historical buildings or historical places, like they're being rebuilt on the historical ruins or whatever, you know. I've seen that in a few places, or what's happening in Hassan Cave is like, yeah, I mean, we probably all know about Hassan Cave. I think almost 10,000-year-old settlement, which is being flooded by this dam project, which is also a geostrategic project of controlling the water. And then these historical buildings that were being partly rebuilt with original stones, but then new stuff is built around in this archaeological park. The people from the old place, they're being resettled in this new satellite place, satellite town, kind of on the other border, on the other shore of the Tigris. It's very bizarre. It's like a historicized Disneyland. So history serves also like theme parks or entertainment. I mean, but I wouldn't place this just as a Turkish phenomena, because it's happening in other places as well, that it becomes entertainment. Yeah. Or other places like the panorama of the conquest of Constantinople, 1453. You know, it's like this conquest becomes a theme park element. Yeah. Does it answer?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I mean, maybe I will give the floor to Refik and Serdar, the curators of the show. They might have questions to you at the same time. So they will be speaking in Turkish. I will translate for you.
Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Serdar ben. Andreas'ın işlerini ilk galiba 2010, it was 2018 right? You first. İlk 2018'de Tarabya Kültür Akademisi'ne misafir sanatçı programına geldiğinde o yıl sonu etkinliğinde görme şansım oldu benim. Ya o zaman tanışmamıştık. Fakat o ilk dönemde çektiği fotoğraflar çok etkilemişti beni. Çok ilginç gelmişti bu tarihin işte sürekli yeniden yazılıyor olması, bir şeylerin üstünün örtülüyor, başka şeylerin ön plana çıkarılıyor olmasına ele alan işler üretmiş olması o kısa sürede ilgimi çekmişti. Daha sonra da işte Asena bir sergi yapılması fikri olduğunu söylediğinde aslında tanıştık ve daha işin ortasındaydı aslında. Çekimlere devam ediyordu. Daha sonra işte 2000 galiba 21 yılında biraz daha işler biriktikten sonra işlere daha detaylı bir şekilde bakmaya başladık. Yani biz bu işleri aslında birkaç şeyden ele aldık. Açıdan ele almak bizim ilgimizi çekti. Demin kendisinin de bahsettiği gibi bu tarihin yeniden sürekli yazılıyor olması ve bazı şeylerin üstünün kapatılıyor olması ve bazı şeylerin de çok turistikleştiriliyor olması ya da bir eğlence nesnesi haline getirilmesi ya da bir arafta bir durumda kalıyor olması bizim çok ilgimizi çekti. Bu iki aks üzerinden ilerleyen bir anlatı nasıl kurabiliriz? Biraz ona baktık aslında bu sergiyi kurarken de. Şeyden bahsedebilirim. Yani esasında bu broşür metninde çok uzun uzun anlattığımız için burada çok detayına da girmeye gerek yok herhalde işlerle ilgili. Belki burada nasıl bir izledik, küratöryel yaklaşım izledik. Biraz ondan bahsedebilirim. Ya bizim için değişik bir tecrübe oldu aslında. Çünkü genelde biz hani işin üretim sürecinden itibaren sanatçılara çalışmayı yeğliyoruz. İş üretilirken de işte edit edilirken de son şekli verilmesinden önce de işin içine dahil olmak bizim genelde yeğlediğimiz bir şey. Burada biraz daha farklı bir şey oldu, çalışma şekli de oldu bizim açımızdan. Hem aynı ülkelerde yaşamıyor olmaktan hem işte uzun süreliğe yayılmış bir işin son parçalarını bir araya getirmekle ilgili birçok aslında bir kitap yayınlanacak. Belki ondan bahsedebiliriz. Önümüzdeki ay içerisinde. Andreas zaten bütün seçimleri aslında hemen hemen bitirmişti bu sergiden önce. Kitap için belli anlatılar eşliğinde bir seçki yapmıştı. Biz bu seçkiyi en iyi bir sergi ortamında bir galeri mekanında nasıl bir araya getirebiliriz? Nasıl belli başlıklar ayırabiliriz ki hem izleyiciler için gezmesi kolay olur hem de o anlamsal bütünlüğü nasıl sağlayabiliriz açısından bir yaklaşım belirledik aslında. Çok fazla böyle eserleri elemek gibi bir yaklaşım içerisine girmedik küratörler olarak. Biraz daha elimizde var olan bütün malzemeleri en hakkaniyetli şekilde nasıl bir anlatı kurabiliriz üzerine gittik. O demin de bahsettiğim bu tarihin yeniden yazımı ve üstünün örtülmesiyle bu arafta kalma durumu üzerine eğilen iki şey var aslında sergide de. Gezerken de onu zaten fark etmişsinizdir. Onları bir şekilde birbirinden ayırmak gibi bir yaklaşımla daha kolay gezilebilir ve anlaşılabilir bir sergi kurulabileceğini düşündük. Çünkü fotoğrafların hepsinde aslında bir hikayesi var. Duvarlarda görmüyorsunuz ama bu duvarların başındaki küçük şeylerde, kartonetlerde hepsinin bir hikayesi var aslında yazdığı Andreas'ın. Bu hem tarihsel hikayelerini anlatıyor hem bugünkü durumlarını anlatıyor. Çeşitli referanslarla birlikte. Onlarla birlikte tabii ki daha fazla bir anlam kazanıyor bu fotoğraflar. Tek başına sadece fotoğraflara bakarak gezmek de mümkün. Ama o arkasındaki tarihsel referansları ya da bu tarihsel referanslar nasıl yeniden şekillendirilmiş ya da üstü örtülmüş, ne amaçlarla örtülmüş biraz bunlara bakarak gezmek de daha da katmanlaştırıyor aslında. Yani biraz Andreas'ın şeyini de yaklaşımını andıran bir şey de var orada. Yani nasıl bu görsel arkeoloji olarak adlandırıyor. Sen bahsettin mi Asena bundan demin? Yani biraz bu bir arkeolog gibi aslında tarihin katmanlarını kazan bir yaklaşımı var Andreas'ın fotoğraflarda, gittiği yerlerde. Sergide de biraz öyle bir yaklaşım var. Yani ilk başta bazı şeyler daha görünür ama işte o belki o metinlerle biraz daha derine inmek mümkün oluyor. O kazı yapmak mümkün oluyor. Biraz onu da sağlamaya çalıştık sanırım. Senin ekleyeceğin bir şey var mı? Öyle mi?
Merhaba. Belki Andreas'a soru sorabiliriz. Öyle daha iyi olabilir. Maybe we can ask some questions to you. You already mentioned about your approach, how you started, but maybe you can also explain how you made a research on the areas, because some areas, the local Turkish people or the people living in Turkey, they know, but the outsiders, they don't know. And how you started the research on working on areas like, I don't know, Stanos, that we learned from you, probably. Maybe you explain those approach, how you started your research and how you continue on the process.
Well, there's always a long phase of preparation and of research before I go out to take pictures and I plan journeys. And so I read a lot. Historical material, books, in the internet, novels, poetry, and once and then I get hints of places in this material, and that wakes up my curiosity, and I want to see the place. But I couldn't tell, like there's one path. There's many paths, how I find these places. Sometimes I find a hint in the internet, even with an image, you know, like for Stanius, in Stanius, for example. It was on a blog of an Armenian traveler. And he was saying, oh, here used to be a village, and there are these gravestones, and they're disappearing because of illegal treasure hunters who take them away, and they dig for valuables and stuff, you know, and saying that this is a place close to Ankara. So that's how I came upon that place. Other places have a different path, a different story. For example, Musadak, you know, there's a novel from Franz Werfel on Musadak. And I went up on Musadak thanks to your contacts, Nayat, in Vakıflı, which is the last or the only Armenian village in Turkey. Yes. Yeah, so I went up that mountain, which was quite something. Yeah.
Yok aslında. Belki tekrar bana sıra gelecek mi? Okay. Yani Serdar çok iyi toparladığı için çok ek yapabileceğim bir şey yok. Belki şeyden bahsedebiliriz. Yani biz başta işte Serdar'ın dediği gibi yani bütün her şeyi sergilemeyi düşündük ama o tabii Andreas'ın da istediği şeydi aslında. Belki şey diye de düşündük arada. Aslında fotoğrafları bir miktar azaltsak daha az ve daha etkili bir şey yaratabilir miyiz diye, ama orada şey var tabii, yani Andreas'ın hepsini sergilemek isteği vardı ama zaten fotoğrafların hepsinin hikayesi birbirini farklı şekilde tamamladığı için galiba bu şekilde daha iyi oldu diye düşünüyorum.
Çok teşekkürler. Ben sözü Aylin Vartanyan'a vereceğim. O da serginin yakında çıkacak yayını için çok güzel bir yazı kaleme aldı.
Teşekkürler. So I will continue in English, I guess, if it's okay. When Asena first asked me to write about Lang's photographs, I was really going through a very busy time. My first reaction was, I'm not sure if I can make time for it. Then I saw Andreas's photographs and I said, I have to write about these photographs. And for a long time, I stayed with these photographs in bits and pieces. As the title says, they were broken pieces for me. And I made an attempt to find a common narrative about these pieces. And first of all, I have to say that I'm really happy to see all these pieces together in one room. It gives another impression on me because I was looking at all these photographs, each one of them, one by one, on my computer screen, which is terrible. We also had long conversations with Andreas, and having heard from him that he was just drawn to these places, the images, and the stories came later, really also attracted my attention. And I think this is also, I like taking photographs too, and this is also how I take photographs. I'm being called by certain places, and then I follow this thread, and then I go find more images. But of course, it was also sad that as an Armenian who was born and raised in this country, I didn't know about many of the Armenian churches that Andreas photographed. I didn't even know about those stories of the monasteries, churches. First, I was ashamed of myself, to tell you the truth. Then I came across this notion that was coined by Claudia Card, the natal alienation, which resonated with me, which also resonated with this theory of collective memory by Pierre Nora, in which he says sometimes collective memory that is rendered invisible requires a kind of illumination of discontinuity. And I think Andreas's photographs resonate with me in that sense. I mean, a life, a continuation, a continuous life that was existent in certain places of this country at some point were rendered invisible. And this discontinuity, or this rupture, I would say, not even broken, maybe this rupture, also needs to be seen, told. If not, as I also mentioned in my writing, it creates chronic pain. Around the time when I was writing for Andreas's photos, I was also reading Byung-Chul Han's Palliative Society, in which he talks about pain a lot. And he also mentions about this notion of, I should check my notes, the notion was, he says, pain is the incarnation of truth. We can translate this as hakikat, hakikatin neydi? Hakikatin ete gelmiş. Şimdi nasıl çevireceğim? Bir dakika. I have to check my notes again. Acıyı et olmuş hakikat. I think this is how I translated it into Turkish, incarnation of truth. And I started seeing the whole geography as a piece of body, which carries pain. And I saw somehow Andreas's photographs as the carriers of this pain, which we have to confront in order to ease our souls in a way. Because if we render pain invisible, it turns into chronic pain. And we never get healed. All of us living on this land, I would say. So this was my take on Andreas's photographs. And around the time when I was writing it, also the earthquake happened, another rupture in the country. And what do we do with also this notion of brokenness? They all stayed with me. What have we done before? What are we doing now? What are we going to do with broken beings in a way? And again, I come back to the arts again, and maybe this notion of aletheia also pops in my mind. Aletheia is somehow rescuing maybe stories, memories that have been rendered invisible or that have been left in the dark. Bring it to the light. Lete is the river of forgetting, so aletheia is bringing this for these images or stories that have been rendered invisible and unheard to light. And I think I'm drawn to these photographs again and again because they are beings. These ruins are beings, and they are sitting silently, waiting to become captured by a soulful photographer like Andreas. And here we are seeing all of them together. I don't know how it's affecting you sitting here, especially these two photographs behind us. They have nothing to do with ruins, you might ask. I spent some days with these two photographs, and I saw these two photographs. These are workshops, actually, right? One of them is a workshop of a tire repair person who, the other one is a sculptor who makes Atatürk sculptures. And these two workshops came to me as laboratories, let's say, in which collective memory is built. Like if there was a place where collective memory is constructed, maybe they would look something like this, where only there is room for stories of victory, not pain, but only victory. Because in these two workshops, you'll see a picture of Fatih Sultan Mehmet entering Istanbul, the story of victory. And in the other one, you have the sculpture of Atatürk. So if we stay with stories of victory all the time, we stay a bit chaotic, I would say, and not true to ourselves. That's all, I guess. Okay.
Thank you. Sözü şimdi yani daha sonra hem konukların arasında Andreas'la bir söyleşi olur hem sizlerden soru ve yorumlar alırız. Son olarak ben sözü Nayat Karaköse'ye vereceğim. Nayat Hrant Dink Vakfı'ndan ve aynı zamanda Hafıza Mekanı'nın koordinatörü ve geçen hafta 23,5 Hrant Dink Hafıza Mekanı Avrupa Müze Forumu tarafından Avrupa Yılın Müzesi Ödülü 2023 Kenneth Hudson Kurumsal Cesaret ve Doğruluk Ödülü'ne layık görüldü. Kutluyorum. Gerçekten çok gurur duyduğumuz bir ödül oldu. Sözü Nayat'a veriyorum.
Okay, çok teşekkürler. Biz de çok mutluyuz bu ödülden dolayı. Mayıs güzel başladı, güzel gidecek diye umuyoruz. So I'll switch to English. Maybe I'll first tell how I met Andreas. I think it was during the pandemic 2 years ago. So and he came to our memory site and he spoke about this project in his mind. And Aylin, I felt the same feeling because now, Andreas, I know you have visited far more places and cultural heritage sites than I've ever seen as an Armenian. And it's become a burden at the same time. But now, with putting out this exhibition, you're also healing our souls in that way. And today I saw this exhibit for the first time. I saw the photos beforehand. And suddenly something clicked in my mind because I view you at the same time as a storyteller because we are deprived of many stories in this country. And there is a Nigerian author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, that who I love very much. And she talks about the danger of the single story. And she has an excellent TED Talk about it. So I'll quote some of her words and I will connect it to you. She says, "It's impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word in Igbo, it's a language spoken in Nigeria, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is Nikali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of Nikali, how they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person." And she ends her speech saying that when we reject the single story, when we realize that there's never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. So your art perspective and photographs actually opens the door to enable us to access to different stories that are not told, because we see many images here, churches in the middle of nowhere, and you intertwine the presence of absence the absence is very much present there. And I think your photos here, they evoke two main questions. What is missing? What is lacking? And what is over-present, as we see in this, workshops over there? Because we know that when you excavate this memory, there is never a single story or a single meaning of a certain place. It's like, you go to these like old buildings and there are layers and layers wallpapers. And when you scrape them, you reach to a different color, different texture, but also those buildings, they have witness to many different things. And it's about, it's up to the storytellers, artists to excavate that memory and to shed light on what is missing. Especially when I look at this, let's say, staircase in Urfa, Şanlıurfa. Some people may only view this as a soul staircase, but it's a memory side as well. It triggers certain questions because when we were building up 23.5 Hrant Dink side of memory, one of the main things that we have learned was that memory sides are more of a question than an answer. It evokes certain questions. So that staircase to me evoked, okay, who were living in this house? Who were the Armenians living in this house? How many Armenians were there in Urfa a century ago? Where have they gone? What kind of stories, what kind of a life they were having there? Even then, it can lead you to this question, why they put the title Şanlı in front of Urfa in 1980s. This is a maybe simple, but at the same time, a very big question. So one single photograph can lead us to that questions, and it evokes, also people's conscience in a different way. For instance, in the memory side, we have this online interactive map that you know very well, where we feature all these cultural heritage structures built by non-Muslim minorities in Turkey. We have almost 10,000 structures such as church, synagogues, schools, cemeteries, and we have school groups. Because in this country, we know that there is an erased memory and there's a system which dictates you what to remember, or also orders you what to forget. Andreas, with his photography, is challenging that as well. And in our memory side, when we show this interactive map, we ask this very simple question to the students, how many Armenian schools are there in present Turkey? Do you have a guess? Some of them, sorry? Now? Okay, 16. So let's go before 1915. How many Armenian schools were there a century ago in this geography? Any guesses? Above? A bit above. So the number we have identified is 1,329. Only in one Bitlis region, there were 48 schools. So when you ask these questions, then you encourage also these people to ask, what has happened? Where have they gone? Because sometimes, we just pronounce numbers, right? 1.5 million Armenians were killed. It's really easy to, say it, and then people hear it, and then nothing happens. But when you ask this question, they will go home and they will question, that massive presence of that massive absence as well. Because also they will discover that, the, let's say, cinema hall that they're going now used to be a Greek school in the past. So I think one of the missions of the photographer is to trigger those questions, tell the stories that we have been deprived of because of the dominant narrative, because of the politics of oblivion as well, and just open the way to dialogue in a different way, to foster dialogue in a different way as well. And also, we are silenced, especially, in Turkey, disadvantaged groups, minorities, they are dealing with the silence as well, and how to translate these silences. I think each of these photographs are just a translation of our silences. It gives us new words, new opportunities. Now we are talking about, Istanos, let's say, in Ankara. It's just because we have also at the foundation an old version of this place where there were inhabitants there. That emptiness, tells us many, many things. But it's up to us also how to look at it, how to unlock the doors of the history as well. So thank you, Andreas, for this, courageous work as well, because you have traveled also in difficult places, and it's not easy in Turkey to do field work in local places as well. And thank you for uniting these histories and stories with us.
Yani çok teşekkürler. Belki de işte salondan soru ve yorum alarak ilerlemek uygun olur hemen.
Hello, Andréas Lang. Thank you very, very much because it's a wonderful exhibition, and it's broken memories, and as Aylin said, they are really beings. I see them like characters waiting to be discovered in a play, like from centuries back. And it's now, after the exhibition, I feel that memory is about heart, it's broken hearts for me. So we always think that memory is about mind, but it's the heart. Because it's interesting. Now I've been abroad for 10 months, and I came just for the vote, and I feel so like these photos, and I'm questioning myself, why do I feel like a stranger? I was born here, even just 10 months, and imagine all the immigrants, and these two photos that Aylin Vartanyan mentioned. For me, when I looked at them, I said, oh, he knows Turkey so well. I mean, it's like, because, this feeling of living in one place is very difficult to convey. Even with words, you cannot sometimes speak. But the visual narrative is so strong, I immediately see that you know where I come from. So, and even I don't know where I come from. So, but this helplessness, getting some voice is so visually present. I really thank you, because it's really amazing, because it's like I'm really feeling very melancholic, and I was saying, is it Istanbul? Why am I like this? And now I also have the answer, kind of. Because it's exactly this. It's this statue being helpless in the middle of nowhere, we all passing by, but in us, in our hearts, I feel everyone living here in this country feels more or less the same way, like these pictures. We are never finished, we're always incomplete. I mean, I say we, okay, this is my idea, or my heart. It's like, I feel so incomplete all the time, and I don't know. So they really reveal this side. And you're very brave, to be honest. My question is, have you ever, not ever, when you were on this journey, did you have a moment that really changed something in you or moved in you? Probably the photos, yes, but did you, for instance, do you have any personal story on your journey that you've had? So this is my question.
Is this working? Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ipek, for the wonderful comment. Really, thank you. Touches me very much. Yeah, there is a story, quite a crazy police story in Kars on the Armenian border. There's other stories as well, like, but this one was quite remarkable. I had a rental car. I was like, to get around, it's the best with a rental car. And so I'm in this museum, and all of a sudden I get a phone call. It's in Turkish. I didn't understand, so I hang up. Another time, same guy, didn't understand. Third time, and the fourth time, the guy says, it was a different guy. He spoke English, but not so good English. This is the police. Where are you? I'm like, what? this is the police. Tell us your position. You photographed the police station. And I said, no, I didn't. And I'm not going to tell you my position. Maybe you want to rob me, you know. So I hang up. And then he was saying, okay, if you don't tell us your position, you have a problem. And I'm okay, then I have a problem. So I switch off the phone. And then I was in the street again, you know, with the car, and the traffic police pulls me by. Then I knew, okay, that was the police. And so they didn't speak English, and I don't speak well Turkish, just a few words. So I called Chidem from Tarabya, and she was so graceful to translate. And remember Chidem? Yes. And they were kind of friendly, the police guys, you know, and I showed them on my camera, okay, here, look, I didn't photograph the police station. Before the other guy who called in English, I told him, listen, later on I will clear it out. I go to the police station, so you don't have to worry, you know. But anyway, okay. So they see I didn't photograph the police station. But in the meantime, all of a sudden, all these other police units came, and most in civil, you know, like, I don't know, they didn't wear uniform, anti-terror, whatever, I don't know. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by like 12 policemen in the street. I'm like, okay. But anyway, they quickly understood I didn't photograph the police station. Some guy had an idea, I don't know. He saw a foreigner going around with a camera, I don't know, whatever. And anyway, I also had this letter I asked from the consulate to give me that I'm not a journalist or, you know, doing nothing problematic, that I'm a visual artist working on a project. So I showed them that. The whole thing was relaxing, and they excused themselves, and so it was. But then the two guys came who called me, and they were really weird, and I would have not wanted to be with them alone. And they were saying, you don't have a problem with us. And I said, no, I don't have a problem with you. Erase the messages. And I'm like, okay, I erased the messages. But I didn't know what messages because my phone was off. So later on, I switched on the phone, and there were some messages. This is the police. Come immediately to Winter Palace Hotel. And it was strange. It was a funny feeling afterwards. Yeah. The rental car. Yeah, but I'm glad the other guys were around. Yeah.
Başka soru, yorum. Aslında burada 23.30'da çalışmış arkadaşımız Sena da var. Zorla ona sözü vereceğim. Onu da kutluyorum çünkü 23.30'a emeği var.
Teşekkür ederim. Congratulations on this show, and I really enjoyed this talk and how Aylin, Nayat, Refik and Serdar talked about your work. Shall I ask a question? Okay. So there are different places in this exhibition, but then you chose to exhibit them all together. Like, what's the reason behind it? Like, it's there's Hassan Cave, and then there's cars, and like, could you tell a bit about how the work is situated in the exhibition space? How did you decide to place the pictures on the walls?
Oh, that's the work of those guys.
Okay.
You ask them.
Okay.
Ya aslında şöyle oldu. Demin de dediğim gibi işte iki ana aks var gibi sergide. Bir tanesi daha çok Ermeni mirası üzerine odaklanan mekanlar ve oradaki tarihin unutturulmaya çalışılması ile ilgili. Bir tanesi de daha böyle arafta kalmış mekanlar. Yani sadece Doğu ya da Güneydoğu Anadolu ya da işte başka bölgelerdeki Ermeni mirası değil de tarihin yineden işte bir yeniden yazılması, işte turistikleştirilmesi üzerine böyle iki ana aks var gibi. O yüzden çok farklı yerlerden fotoğraflar bir arada olabiliyor. Daha çok şey yapmaya çalıştık. Yani Ermeni mirasıyla ilgili olan fotoğrafları belli bölgelere ayırıp işte Doğu Anadolu'dakiler bu duvarda, Güneydoğu Anadolu'dakiler bu duvarda gibi ve işte Ankara'dakiler burada. Onun dışındakiler de Türkiye'nin çeşitli yerlerinden olan bu arafta kalma durumları ve yeniden inşa ve turistikleştirilme duvarları da bu kırmızı duvarlarda gördüğümüz şeyler aslında fotoğraflar. Tematik olarak birbirine yakın o hissi veren şeyler ama mekansal olarak çok farklılar dediğin gibi. İşte Hasankeyf'te var bir uçta, şu uçta Konya'da var. İşte İstanbul'dan fotoğraflar da var orada. Orada biraz o arada kalma hali üzerine odaklanan şeyler bir arada. Çok daha yoğun bir bölgeye yayılıyor kırmızı duvarlarda olanlar. Ama diğer gri duvarlarda gördüğümüz aslında coğrafi olarak birbirine yakın yerler aynı zamanda.
Bu arada Geniş Açı Proje Ofisi'nin Pera Müzesi'ndeki sergisi de devam ediyor. Zamane İstanbulluları. O da Eylül sonuna kadar açık. Onu da çok şiddetle öneririm.
Thank you so much. And it was also lovely to hear about these photos from Aylin as well. So thank you. My question is about the encounters that you may have had with people in these places. You talked a bit about your research process, about the readings and everything. So I was wondering, were there a people element that took you to one of these photos, or how did the local encounters actually affected this journey as well?
Actually, yeah, I tell you a positive police story. Because in Chungush, they showed me where the monastery is. Because I found it in a travel book, a note about this monastery, but it was impossible to be found, hidden behind a valley, as later I found out. So I was driving around up and down the village and everywhere. So apparently I was getting suspicious again, and then there was a police control, and it was in Kurdish territory, you know, and it's quite sensitive, and so they stopped me, and I'm like, oh, okay, you have to check me because this is probably a sensitive area, and they yeah. And then also a guy came and he said, oh, I lived in Bochum, and he spoke perfect German. So anyway, they checked my passport and everything, and they were okay, you know. And then I tell them, listen, guys, I've been looking for this place, for this monastery. Can you please tell me where it is? And they say, yeah, we bring you there. So I followed them with the car, and they brought me, and it was really difficult to be found. That's one encounter, but many others. I just wanted to balance out the police story first. Yeah. For example, Babatoros, who took me up on Musadak. He's the owner of a restaurant in Vakifli, which is, I think, the only Armenian village, yes, in Turkey. And so we spent the whole day up there, and it was amazing. We went before sunrise and came back after sunset. And it was really hard because you couldn't speak that it's even a path. It's like going over rocks through thorn bushes and everything. It was absolutely trying physically. But it was wonderful to be with him, and he brought some chicken, and he made a fire, and he had rake. So, yeah. And he made this fireplace next to an old stone well, which was used by the Armenians on Musadak, you know, when they refuged. The story is probably you all know, Musadak, when the surrounding Armenian villages were taking refuge on a mountain and then resisting to the army for 40 days, as it is said. And then they were rescued by French warships. And yeah, and I had this view down to the sea. I mean, visually, it's absolutely breathtaking. But I could really imagine how it must have been on this mountain, and it's very barren. It's that there's all these rocks and thorn bushes, and I could also see how it was very hard to get up there, and how they could resist for such a long time against a massive force of even with artillery. I think there are 2 artillery pieces, if it's accurate in the novel. Yeah, that was something.
Thank you.
Sure, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and it's great to hear actually from you about my hometown as well. And I'm really glad that you went there before the earthquake as well. Like, I mean, I hope you see a lot. And thank you so much for the exhibition as well. I really enjoyed, and I didn't actually expect to be affected that much, as I see these broken memories as incomplete memories. And in psychology, there is a belief when there is something incomplete, it's gonna somehow come up, like be enlightened and complete itself until it's resolved. And I think this is what you mentioned by chronic pain when it's not resolved. And I think it's a way to somehow those pains come up and say, hey, I'm here, and I don't know, maybe try to be completed in people's mind or with those reflections. And I think it's a great platform for this too. So thank you so much. As a citizen of this country, let's say, who lived or who experienced all of those. So my question here is about more psychological side of this. I am pretty sure that there is a very sociological side while you're choosing your places and taking your pictures, which is a great idea. But also I wonder if there was any psychological things that you take into account while you are choosing the places, or maybe somehow it affected you. Or maybe the stories that you heard as you hear there in there, and maybe if you see any incomplete stories that are still waiting to be completed. So, and thank you so much for your comment about the broken hearts as well, and I totally agree. That was my question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the comment and for the question. Many elements. Where to start? Broken heart is one part. I mean, there's many incomplete stories. I think I've only spent 2 to 3 weeks in East Anatolia, the region of Kars and Van. The initial plan was to go with the car all the way down to Mardin and then to Diyarbakir, but due to an appointment and various reasons, I only had to do it in 2-3 weeks. And I knew there was so much more. Because a lot of places are really hard to get to, you have to walk. For example, this one church in a church ruin, which used to be a monastery with 5 different churches. I had to go twice to find it. So already to go to that place, it took me 2 days. Because the first time, only had a note, okay, leave the road here, then you go down that dirt track with the car, but then you have to leave the car at a quarry and walk this goat path for 4 miles or something. So first I took the wrong goat path and I ended up nowhere. And then the second time I made it. Many times these places are very hidden, very unseen, or in one place, for example, 7 churches, which you see up there, where I photographed the interior. It's completely hidden. It's a small village above Lake Van, and the Hodja has the key for what remains of the monastery. So I found the Hodja, and he opened the place. There's more. There's more, and I hope I can go back to some places, because I still feel it's not yet finished, maybe. Yeah. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, sure. It's your answer. Of course, it's true. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are two things for me here. Old things, hidden things, but still very beautiful in their serenity. I don't know. They're just so beautiful, even though you know the sad history behind them still today. And there is the new reconstructed things, and all of them look very cheap, extremely cheap. And this is like very obvious to Turkish people here. Is all over social media how ugly these newly constructed things, like a horse, like the stones you had at the gate of that shop. I forgot what shop it is. Just very ugly things. So is this something that attracts you in your photographs, that contrast? And what do you think about it?
Yeah. I find clashes interesting. Yeah, and the ugliness can be interesting too. I mean, I live in Berlin. You know, you have so many clashes there and so much ugliness, and but it somehow visually it becomes interesting and appealing. Even if particularly you don't want to spend all your life there, you know, in an ugly place. But yeah, the contrast, I think it's can be an interesting element in an image. Yeah.
And also, I tried to mean something else. I don't think I put it in the correct form. The reconstructed things are reconstructions of history. Like the museums you went to, some of these reconstructions of the conquest of Istanbul and the Atatürk statue there, they're not very pretty. So there's something there that, you know, to me, like when you hide certain things, the resultant construction is weak and somehow ugly because of that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah, it becomes fast food kind of, no? Fast food architecture. But it's also a sign of our times. I mean, I don't see it only in Turkey. I see it in other places as well. Unfortunately, we live in those times. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I wanted to ask, so you use this like beautiful term, visual archaeology, and you talk about this, you're inviting us to peel back time and look to the past. But I wonder how you felt when you're taking these images as kind of like an archival matter, that it's also something future, these images are kind of also future facing, because lots of these buildings are in a very precarious situation.
So can you say again, future?
Future, like they also might like look to the future, because some of these buildings might not exist in the near future. For example, what is left of the 5 churches in Digor. So how do you see yourself like taking these images as kind of like archival matter maybe at the same time? And do you see them as like a project where you might, for example, return to these places and document them over a longer period of time? I'm not sure if that it's kind of posed.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, now with the horrible earthquake,
yeah, exactly.
I wonder if some places are still standing. But at the same time, I feel like, is it valid to go, you know, and take pictures where so many people have died? And but it's become an archive. Maybe it could become an archive. I don't see the work as a documentary work. Yeah, I don't know. Does it answer the question, or I mean, it's hard to answer, you know. But I'd like to go back to some places, yeah, and see them. and see how they go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just asking Andreas this question because we see the photos of destroyed Sur, because I had the chance to see the old Sur. I was one of the lucky ones, and in 2020, I got to see the ruins. And last year with Aylin, we were there and saw the gentrification, which was heart-wrenching beyond words. So I was just wondering, if you saw the latest version of Sur that is like, promoted in a very different way now, what kind of feelings it evoked in you? Because, okay, you answer, I'll tell my...
Okay. I kind of saw an intermediate version of both, which is interesting. Yeah, but you see what kind of strange Disneyland Sur is coming to life there, and it's, you wonder, wow, okay, this is going to be the new old Sur. Very bizarre, very bizarre. And I saw the last houses, the original houses of Sur, before being completely torn down. Some had even still traces of the fighting, explosion traces, bullet traces, etc. So you have these two things going on at the same time. It was surreal, yeah.
What I felt, maybe it will be a bit provocative, but when I saw the new Sur, I told myself, and probably talked with Aylin, that it was left in ruins. It was better if it was left in ruins. Still, you would gather some grasps of memory and history there, because the new one is a totally kind of erasal of this whole history. It's a different version of genocide, cultural genocide as well. So at that moment, I felt I wish it was all left in ruins and people were just, at least still grasping some sentiment of Sur. Of course, I wish nothing had happened in 2016 like that. And it's not a very old story history. It's a very recent history, and it happened in front of our eyes. Imagine what has happened. This also evokes that question. If it's happening just only a decade ago, then let's consider what has happened centuries ago. But that was really heart-wrenching to see that, reconstruction in that way. Last year, it's been a year, right? Last May, yeah, around this time. Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah, thank you so much for your exhibition, and thank you so much for telling what is untold, in this land. I recently heard a story from my professor about the Holocaust monuments in Berlin. And back then, when German government decided to make this monuments for Holocaust, they organized a contest, and one of the artists kind of boycotted it, and then they say, I think if you want to create a monument for Holocaust, we should just bomb to where it's Brandenburg Tor or this region. That will be the representation of what we had done. So I was wondering, so you got this journey, and it's not just genocides or rupture, destruction. It's also a denial for 100 years, and also it's also tears that we held for 1,000 years, sort of. I feel in that way. So what was your experience in this journey? I'm so Nietzschean in this sense, about monumentation. When we talk about Mustafa Kemal sculptures, reconstruction of history was sort of got the base in 19th century, with the museums, all this illusionary construction, and then showing this great civilization. But at the same time, I'm always confused. I have no clear idea about it. But I was when I heard this story about the Holocaust monuments, so I was feeling what will be in Turkey one day, hopefully. And you got in this journey, and then you saw this place is probably like, I don't know, many. So yeah, what do you think about it? I was wondering. Like, I was wondering, like, you know, about like Armenian genocide, like about Armenian genocide, and then the denial in this lands, you know, like the constant denial. So like for German governments, like after the war, like everything was like sort of, you know, like compared to Turkey, like Armenian genocide. It was like there's a different historical lines, you know, like paths that goes. So I was just wondering, you know, this monumentation and representation, like, yeah. So this is like, what do you think? I was wondering.
I think in Germany there was also a lot of denial about the Holocaust immediately after the war. Still, yes. Yes. Sometimes things take time. And I don't really know if I can properly answer that question. I wish Turkey that and its people that they recognize this open wound and start healing it, because it's very important for the society, I think. For those descendants who were victims, you know, who their ancestors were victims, but also of those who were the perpetrators. It's a double wound. It's quite clear in Germany that it's a double wound. And in Germany, it took the third generation to really look at it, to work on it, and digest it, you know. Yeah. In Turkey, I hope something will start soon, or some things had started. I mean, what you do, Nayat, you know, with the Hrant Dink Foundation is amazing. Yeah. I think it's all up also to individual initiative and positioning. Not everything can be done by institutions. Yeah, so I think that individual aspect, I think it's important. Yeah, but it can be inspired by many things. Yeah. Does it answer?
Bu arada söz ettiğiniz ekibi Hrant Dink Vakfı konuk etmişti. Nayat belki söz eder.
Yani o dediğiniz sanatçılar isimleri Horst Weisel, Andreas Knitz. 23.30'da da bir işleri var, eserleri var. Bizim çok beğendiğimiz iki sanatçı. Olay şöyle gelişiyor. Aslında bir o araziyi satmak üzerine bir gazete ilanıyla başlıyor olay. Fake bir gazete ilanı yapıyorlar ve daha sonrasında o yarışmaya katılıyorlar ve diyorlar ki imha edilen bir halkı, imha edilen bir ulusal simgeden daha iyi hiçbir şey anlatamaz. Ve ben yıllar sonra o jüride bulunan birisiyle tanıştım başka bir konferansla ve bana şu itirafta bulundu. Negatif oy kullandım ve hayatımda verdiğim en yanlış kararlardan birisiydi diye öyle de bir not düşüm. Onların da bir büyükelçilik kurma projesi de 23.30'da işleri var. Gelirseniz görürsünüz. Zaten davet ediyoruz ara ara Türkiye. Şimdi bir Ermenistanlı bir projemiz var yürümekte olan. Bakalım. Evet, Counter Memorial, yani Counter Memorial tam da işte o yokluğun varlığını göstermek üzerinde, Presence of Absence üzerinden çıkan çok çok ilham verici de işleri var. Çok sevdiğimiz iki sanatçı.
I have a quick question. Thank you very much for this great exhibition. I'm wondering what sort of elements these monuments, the Atatürk monuments, for you as photographer, why you pick the monuments among the Atatürk symbolism, and what sort of meaning taking of these pictures for you? Why did you pick the Atatürk monuments among the, I mean, the Atatürk symbolism is very common in Turkey, as you know, but you purposely pick the monuments, we don't see any images of Atatürk, but we see the monuments. What is the meaning of these choose? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, but can you say which picture you're referring to? This one
No,
or
for
the
instance,
one in Izmir?
The both. Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to avoid Atatürk when you take pictures in Turkey. It's like.
No, I'm just taking picture of the monuments is another thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Just I'm wondering why you picked the monuments.
Well, we can talk about the pictures in question maybe, because it's easier for me than talk in general about Atatürk in pictures. I have many Atatürk monuments I photographed, but it's not about the Atatürk monument, it's about a cityscape maybe, or but what it says, the Atatürk monument in this place, etc. For example, I photographed one, it's not in the exhibition, an Atatürk monument on a triumphant horse, but it stands in an architecture which is from Russian time in Kars. Kars was a Russian town for a while, etc. So that contrast was a visual moment for me. But it's not really about Atatürk. Yes, it is, but it's not, So the Izmir picture, that's another photographic moment with the Atatürk maske, in the mountain and the balcony in the houses. It's like, you wonder, what is it like for the people to live there with Atatürk maske? You go on the balcony, have a cigarette, and you have Atatürk, or looking into your bedroom. You know what I mean? It's like this presence. But it's interesting and it's surreal and it's also a photographic moment, so that's why I took the picture. Like a Turkish Mount Rushmore, Yes. Does it answer the question? Yeah.
It's just a yes and no question, I swear. So I just wanted to build on this, and I wanted to ask if you, like, for example, with this victory of or conquering to Istanbul picture, and next to it there is a Atatürk. So I was wondering if there is any political motivation that also drives you into these pictures. Like, it's a yes and no question, and I think you also have the right to not to answer. No, like not because they are all together, but I'm asking, including them to your exhibition, and also taking those pictures. Is it like on purpose in a political motivation? I'm saying because it's a that's all.
These two, Atatürk and
yeah. Maybe I can even say in general, but I guess yes. So
in general.
I was going to ask for this too. Let's say
these two. Okay, it's easier.
Yeah, I know. It's a yes or no question. It's an easy question.
Yeah, I mean, no, there's no political motivation. I don't have an agenda.
No, it was not in terms of agenda. It's just maybe like just to show the power relation.
Yes, of course.
In the
of
country.
Course.
So
yeah,
in that sense, I was saying like it's a yes and no question and
yes.
political motivation.
It's yeah, of course. I mean, actually everything. As soon as you select a picture, you have like a picture comes twice into life. Once you take it, once you encounter the place or the moment, etc., and once you select it as a photographer and decide, okay, this is a picture I want to show, I want to put on the wall. And putting on the wall is yet another process than having it in a magazine or anything, on a newspaper. Because putting on the wall, I think, also asks for deeper layers of a picture. So when I choose consciously. So, and these two, to put them together, they're very symbolic for me, and a very conscious choice, because they speak about two streams in Turkey. Like one, kind of the glorification of Ottoman Empire, which speaks of the nowadays, government who likes to glorify the Ottoman Empire and bring it out of the historical tomb, let's say, like glory of the past. And the other one is yet another glory of the past, in another way. Atatürk, Republican, secular, and also the places where I took these pictures speak for that. The one is in Karaköse. The Atatürk metal workshop is in Karaköse. And the Ottoman picture is titled Ottoman Mechanic, is in Fatih. And the car tire workshop is not far from the gate where Edirne-Kapı, I think it is, where Mehmet II, the conqueror, entered Constantinople through the gate. So it's like 200 meters, I think, from the car tire workshop. Yeah. And as you know, Fatih is very religious, conservative. Karaköse is more like Republican-oriented, secular. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, I also didn't expect I will be impressed this much. Thank you for presentation and all the explanations. I have a question to Aylin Hoca. I wonder if while writing the texts, you came to face the concepts of historical memory and collective memory and making a choice between them.
Historical memory, you said?
And
Okay.
collective memory.
Collective memory. I mean, as I said before, I was totally taken aback by the fact that I didn't know many of these churches that Andreas framed in a way or brought to us, to our eyes. And I started searching for them, found some information about them. The images came first. I was attracted to them. That's how I chose. I mean, I couldn't write about each and every photo, but I chose to write about the images that attracted me. The stories came later. I did what somehow Andreas guided me on that, I would say, by his also process. And yeah, I was just thinking about this heart concept that İpek mentioned. And I just came across this Armenian word lately. I was in Armenia last week. The word curiosity in Armenian is related to the heart. Heda kırkra sirutyun. There are two words. It's a long word. I didn't know about this word either. I'm coming to terms with the Armenianness too, I guess. But curiosity also requires some kind of love. It involves having some kind of love in it. So I think I picked the photographs that I loved. The curiosity was followed by love. And I wasn't really thinking about history or memory so much, but about the art part. Because as we talked about, against maybe the politics of forgetting, all we have is the poetics of remembering. So I was mostly guided by the poetics in the photographs, I would say. Then the stories came, and I had to say something about the stories too. And I thought a lot about what was going on in terms of people's stories in these images, and this notion of social death, how rather than memory and remembering or history, I was more taken into this notion of death, social death, and frozenness, of course, too. This is what trauma does, right? Trauma, the reaction to trauma is either fight or flight or being frozen. And those images are also representatives of being frozen. And the only way of defrosting them is maybe the warmth coming from this curiosity and love, maybe. I don't know. Am I being too romantic? I don't know, but I'm just talking about feelings mostly, as you can
Thank you
see.
so much. Looking forward to read the book, really.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, the book will be out hopefully within 2 months, inshallah. And the quotes in the exhibition space are from Aylin's text. So in the book, there will be Aylin's text together with Refik and Serdar's text and the captions and the selection by Andreas. So we will, when we have the book, we will have the launch of it also here and announce it. Is there any other question or comment? Maybe last one.
Thank you. Actually, it's really also is interesting that I don't know how many of us have been to these villages or places, but now as you were talking, I remembered in the 90s, for instance, in Istanbul it was not forbidden, but it was not a good idea to go to the east. I remember I was a teenager, and whenever I had to go on vacation, I had to choose somewhere in the south. And now that you already mentioned, and now I understand very clearly that this is a strategy to also make people definitely forget about the East. So when you also ask the question, about the earthquake and photographing, when you give space to any people, you give them voice, right, visually. And even in these ruins, there is life going on. And we have the images coming from Instagram. So we are also bound to follow one narrative. As you now deconstruct all this main discourse, I think it's very important because you went there, right? Me, I didn't. She didn't. And why were we made not to go there? This is actually a big question. And it clearly shows, even when you ask a question about Atatürk, it's like, there's a yes or no question. You may answer or not. This taboo, is silence. It's so crazy. It's in us. So these pictures actually reveal exactly that. So thank you, once again, if it's the last moment or the last. I don't want to be the last, someone else.
Başka bir soru.
Yeah, thanks so much for the exhibition. I was thinking about this question for a while. I wasn't sure whether to ask it. I thought maybe it's a bit self-centered, I guess, but it seems to lead on from what it was just discussed here. I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about it's something that's talked about a lot, so it's not specific to you, but I'm interested to hear your answer about how you position yourself as an outsider, as somebody who's neither Turkish nor Armenian nor Kurdish, to my knowledge anyway. And obviously in certain ways that's an advantage, and in other ways, in terms of language and things like that, it makes things perhaps more difficult, or perhaps the things that you're trying to show here are not, they're of course related to language, but perhaps I guess you are trying to allow things to speak for themselves through the images. So perhaps the languages, but there's still obviously an element where there would be other understandings that you might understand if your position was different. So yeah, just how you position yourself as I guess an outsider in the context of this project.
I guess the answer is how I position myself as an outsider.
Yeah, or if you position yourself as an outsider, how you position yourself within this so this very specific condition in this geography and history, and how you relate to that, I guess.
To be honest, I hope it doesn't sound presumptuous, but I don't feel like an outsider. To me, it became like a second home, Istanbul especially. And Turkey became close to my heart. And I've been traveling many times to the Middle East, to different places, you know, Syria, Palestine, Israel. And I always feel comfortable. I always feel like there's a piece of my heart here. So, yeah, and especially Turkey, yes. And I've been so grateful to be able to do this work here since 2018. Yeah, and I have so many friends now here. It's great, it's wonderful. So I don't feel like an outsider. In Syria, 2006 and 2010 again. Yeah.
Do you think not having any of the identities that are involved in this territory gave you a different perspective, or helped you maybe see something that is hard to see for the people who are, like I said, either descendants of the victims or the perpetrators?
Yes, definitely. I think in that way, yeah, that's a good point. I remember traveling to East Anatolia with my ex-girlfriend, and she was in some areas, and she's from Istanbul, an artist, and in some places she was so nervous, she was so tense, and I was like, what's going on? And I couldn't really understand. And she couldn't really explain it, but the more I got to know, the more I understood. And at one point, I remember, at one point we were driving from Kars to Van, and it was getting dawn, towards dawn, you know, night was falling, and there was this spectacular scenery, clouds and this volcano landscape. It was completely otherworldly. And so I stopped the car. And we were both fascinated, you know, we both got out of the car. And it was like a scene out of a film, you know, all of a sudden this tank with wheels, you know, like this, not a tank with chains, a tank with wheels comes. And this guy gets out, officer, with a gun and a white revolver. Looked out of a movie, and he was quite friendly. But he said, "Listen, you better get out of." My ex-girlfriend then translated to me, "You better get back into the car because this is really dangerous here. It's PKK area." And from that moment on, she was completely like. But I was relaxed still, you know. I mean, and that's maybe the privilege of not knowing everything. Yes.
Thanks a lot. I mean, thanks for the participation. It was really nice to hear your main questions and comments. I would like to thank participants of this panel and Andreas, of course, and the curators and Aylin and Nayat, and also Tarabya Kültür Akademi for bringing us together and making this work possible. And as I said, we will inform you when we have the book launch here at Depo, inshallah.
Yes,